All right, Seth, how's it going?
What's up, Leo? Good to see you again. This
Very,
is
very, it's been only what, 24 hours, less than 24 hours since we've recorded an episode. Things are
time.
accelerating.
Time is speeding up. AI, Chat GPT, everything is happening faster, 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 faster.
Uh,
The biggest takeaway I had from yeah. By the way, we're super lucky to be able to be speaking to all these people
true,
from all these different perspectives.
true,
Um, and I feel like we yesterday we got really close to understanding what because it's one thing to have ideas. It's another thing, like, how do you move? How does the world move towards those ideas, right? It's like some things just take off, like some TikTok challenge, it just like spreads around the whole world. And then you hear some other incredible idea, like people would all love each other or something like that. And it's like you just can't get any traction. But yesterday in our conversation with AJ, we and started to crystallize or circle around this thing of like, wow, it would be great if life was better for everybody, you know. But then, but AJ
radical
had a great
thought,
question.
right?
Yeah, I know. But AJ had this question that he asked a few times, which was, so what will it be that will make people want to
What is the higher goal for which we
yeah,
would
what
agree
is the
to unite?
goal that will make people, for if we're going to a Giants game, so like, you drive in past the stadium and you see people flocking from every direction in their jerseys with their flags and whatever. They
Right.
know it's game day, right? But what would make people
But that's the
from
thing. It's
multiple
still it's still against another team, right? It's my team against the other team.
so
Can we find something that will unite
what would it be
everyone?
that all humanity would come together from every color? You'd see people come into to the
Right.
game from every color, from every corner, from every
Right.
shape,
And
towards
and there still needs to be a common enemy, but it can be another human being. So who can that be? That's a good question. That's what we want to find out today. And Seth, as you said, I don't know how. I think people should know that we are all we're all volunteering to do this thing, and we have a team of volunteers that helps us find guests and reach out to them and book them, and sometimes the order of guests, it's really out of our control. But as it happened yesterday, we spoke to AJ Steele, who runs one of the more successful podcasts out there, and today we're speaking to a broadcaster. I think he's in the top 20 or 40 in the world. He may correct me on that, but also a great, talk show host, a great host. I listened to a few of his conversations. A very knowledgeable person, and so I hope that we can continue to kind of crystallize it, because just in that little prep talk we had before we started recording, it seemed like he was listening to our talk from yesterday, but I know it wasn't the case. But we are kind of connected, as we like to say.
We all struggle with belief in God. To outright state that there is no God, that to me seems to be a heresy.
if I think of all the Jews I know, most of them I don't think agree. There's a lot of atheists.
So that's with the Christians. Then you have the Muslims, which theoretically also believe in the one God.
Who's the spokesman for God? That's the problem.
Charles MOSCOWITZ, broadcaster, author.
What is the glue that will hold them together?
Both sides will end up with nothing.
He authored more than 20 books, some of them about Jews.
You seem to be describing a potential for civil war.
So what are we going to do?
Charles, please join us.
The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?
Thank you very much, Leo and Seth.
Morning, sir.
Appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah,
Morning,
welcome to
sir.
the Jew Function,
Thank
where
you.
we try to uncover the function of the Jews within the system of humanity.
Indeed.
And you, well, I know you started to say a few things, and we'll jump back right into it. But I'm curious. You lived all your life in the States, right? In America,
Indeed. Boston. Yep.
Boston area, right? Have you experienced anti-Semitism personally?
Yes. I mean, I'd say so. Nothing extremely bad, but yes. I mean, it's more attitudinal. I mean, I had one major anti-Semitic incident when I was growing up, but mostly just a kind of a general treatment that's a little different as a Jew, which can be both good and bad. I mean, it's not necessarily a negative. I mean, people assume good things about me as well.
True.
But yeah, there are certain ingrained attitudes of that I would describe as anti-Semitic.
You know, we say often on our show and in early episodes where we just kind of analyze the Jewish timeline, we say that the Jews have indeed a different origin story, different. I mean, not as far as the mythology of it, just like the the pragmatic circumstances around which the Jewish nation was gathered. They're like really different people. You could say representatives of different clans of people who lived in Babylon, and they gathered around an idea of unity. That's what we say, Yehudi, from the word yichud, unitedness, uniting. That was the thing that kind of bound them, these concepts, and that they are a little different because they're supposed to play a certain role in humanity. So the question is to you is growing up and living your life, you started to say it, but do you feel that somehow you're on a slightly different path, or you're slightly different, or that Jews have a certain difference? Maybe talking about it collectively is easier. I don't know.
Yes.
Do you feel that?
I do feel that way. And as I mentioned, I look at it more sociologically than necessarily religiously, although religion obviously is there. And that is that, in a sense, inspired by the work of C. Wright Mills, who was one of the 60s major sociological thinkers, who developed this idea of the sociological imagination, where you look at the individual, the personal, and then where that person is in society. And then you look at history and you look at where that is in the present to develop an overall view. And in that sense, I believe that Judaism has a mission in the world, that we have a raison d'etre that can unite us, and that does unite us de facto, regardless of how we may arrive at that, regardless of our levels of observance of the law. We all have some basic common denominators, and I think the first one and the prime one is belief in God, right? The Lord our God, the Lord is one. We believe in the creator of the universe, who is the giver of the law, who is separate from the universe that God created, and that we are imperfect beings in this universe whose obligation and whose raison d'etre is to know God as best we can within the context of our imperfection. And that the mission of the Jewish people goes back to Sinai, when God revealed to the world the law, the Torah, all of the moral and ethical precepts by which we fashion our lives, we fashion our nations, and we move forward as spiritually. And that it's our mission as a people not only to know God and to try to craft our own lives and that of our people in accord with the laws and the moral and ethical precepts, but to be a light unto the nations of the world, to be a priestly sect, to basically take on, and the sign of that is that we take on certain extra laws to live our lives that remind us of God and remind us of our role in the world. Now, that doesn't mean that every Jew agrees on levels of observance. We don't. And I don't even know necessarily if we perceive the idea of God in the same way. But we do have some common denominators in terms of an understanding that, first of all, moral and ethical ideas come from outside of us, even though they're abstract. They exist in the universe. And that as men and women, as human beings, we cannot know all things. We're imperfect. And thus, it's our goal to strive toward that, but not to try to impose that on the world, which of course is the enemy of God when that happens.
There's let's say that the Jews are the ones that we know about. So, we think that there's probably many, many more, but let's say it's the 16 million or so that we know about. You referred now to this that we understand that we are these people, that we received this thing and we have an obligation and we have this God. My experience now is that if I think of all the Jews I know, I'm not talking about in Crown Heights, but most of them I don't think agree with that. They don't think that they. There's a lot of atheists. There's a lot of Jews that don't, I'm not special. Nothing special about me. We're just like everyone else. I was at an Israeli restaurant in New York City yesterday. It's like, no, there's a Moroccan restaurant over there. There's a Mexican restaurant over there. This is our Israeli restaurant. We're just a different, there's nothing special or unique about us. We're just, it's like everyone else. So what you said seems to be, if we had that, we could march forward with it. We could do something about it, but I don't even think that we have a common understanding yet. So I'm asking you, it's a good concept, what you just said, but who's on board?
Well, first of all, I think that we all struggle with belief in God, and that can wax and wane, but to outright state that there is no God and that you are an atheist, you just believe that we're just a pile of bones and that there's nothing divine in the universe. That to me seems to be a heresy.
There may be something, maybe they say, but I can't get behind your fairy tale book.
Well, and it also is in a way no different than people who might call themselves Jews for Jesus. They're still Jews, of course. We are, because our mothers were Jews, and because that's not something that's just religious. It's an ethno-religion, but they're outside of the most basic reasons for being a Jew. I mean, if you're going to be worshiping and believing in another form of God other than that of Sinai, and that can also include an open and outright disavowal of God's existence, then you kind of are outside of the fold.
But what do we do though with, so there's 16 million that we know about, let's say, and half of them feel that they have this mission, but we have to deal with what we're talking about, all of them. So,
well, I think you have to approach it with kindness and with care and love, and recognize that in the de facto sense, like for example, in Israel, you have a very large segment of the population, including people that I know and relatives of mine, who consider themselves to be atheistic and who are very secular, but yet even just the fact that they're in Israel is fulfilling the Torah, whether they are willing to know that or not. Just being there is a part of the Torah, because God commanded us to take possession of that tiny and inscrutable little swath of land. For whatever reason, it's a mystery, but that's what's in there. So they, by living there, are fulfilling large portions of the Torah. And that even whether or not they openly will acknowledge that there is a God, and I think when you scratch the surface, they do believe in God, they are living a moral and ethical life de facto that emanates from Sinai in most cases. So, in reality, we have a lot more in common than we may think, and that we are striving toward a general understanding of our mission. Whether or not, some of the outer trappings may be different and levels of observance may be different, but we are still standing at the foot of Sinai.
Can we talk about the Sinai? Let's get a clear understanding. What is that Sinai moment? That distinct, because Jesus was one guy, Buddha was one guy, Muhammad was one guy, Krishna was one guy. But for this people that you're talking about, there was a moment that included the entire nation. Something happened to the entire nation. So what is that moment? Maybe we can talk about that.
What is it to you, at least?
Well, what it is to me is a matter of faith that makes sense, and that somehow when I look at the Torah portion on Shabbos, it makes sense to me. There's something much deeper about it, is that we stood collectively at the foot of Sinai and experienced the Lord God, King of the universe. And our emissary, Moses, went up there representing us, and he received the Torah. Now, it's interesting to note that at that same moment where we, representing all of mankind, reached the highest level of spirituality, we also descended to the lowest level of sin, because we built the golden calf. So that shows the paradox of our existence. And in a sense, that's a reflection with us of all of the struggles that we all have as nations and as people.
So the question is, I think it's clear from what you're saying, sort of paraphrasing, that there is some uniting element, whether it's conscious or not, and it has to do with that moment, and it has to do with this one God, the Creator, which we can talk about what it is exactly, or rather how you kind of perceive it and feel it, and relate to it. And then there's also talk about these two, two extremes that are somehow bound together in our being, or that we manage to embody these two opposites, right?
Mhm.
And then, so put that aside for a second. Now the question is, it sounds really good. It sounds interesting, great. There's a great story there. Then you follow the history of the Jewish people. It's one of perseverance and overcoming and trial by fire, and then going through these all these kind of processes of expansion and reduction and all of that. And from that, a lot of great things come to humanity as well. And yet, anti-Semitism is there. It's always there, always been there, even before Jesus, by the way. Definitely
Sure.
became more institutionalized, right? It became theological during that time. Later, it assumed another color, a different narrative, right? One of race. And then today, it's assuming another narrative, one of politics. So the question is, what are we missing? Very bright group of people, but somehow something is not. Something isn't.
Well, you're asking the most profound question, which is,
Well,
what is anti-Semitism?
Yeah,
Right?
that's what we're here for, Charles.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take a shot at it as best I can, but I mean, the conventional causes of anti-Semitism, which are never going to go away because they exist for any group of people, is that when you're a minority in a country, you're going to have, there's going to be people who are suspicious. You're the other, people fear somebody who's different than them, and they have an imagination, and a lot of that's based on ignorance. And the best way to overcome that is to just get to know people and kind of reach out to people and do so with your own sense of tolerance and sympathy, because they are ignorant, because they don't understand. And also adding to that is a little dose of envy, because the Jewish people, for a lot of very fascinating reasons, generally are very successful people in terms of what we do. I think it has a lot to do with our values of family, of education, of loyalty, of love to each other and helping each other. And a lot of the things that we've embraced as a culture have led to an enormous amount of success in a lot of different areas, some of which are highly visible. So you're going to have envy, and you're going to have a sense of like that there's some kind of conspiracy going on to rip me off, because how can it be that you're more successful? I mean, the second rung is religious anti-Semitism, which emanates from Christianity. This idea that the Jewish people are collectively responsible for the execution of Jesus, and that we today are somehow cursed because of that incident, whether or not it actually happened or not. And of course, even according to New Testament scriptures, ultimately the Romans executed Jesus.
Sure.
And that, Jesus was probably viewed in his day as a heretic by the Judeans, because they were under the jackboot of the Romans, and they were concerned about uprisings, and that the Jewish conception of the Messiah is as a military leader who is going to cleanse the temple and then lead the world into a messianic age. So there was a feeling that we weren't ready for that yet, whether or not they believed in Jesus, and that Jesus thus poses a real genuine threat to the lives of the people of Judea under the Roman protectorate. And so, either way, it seems it's something that's antithetical to us and to the Torah, that we should be held collectively responsible for those decisions that were made 2,000 years ago, regardless of whether they were the right or wrong thing to do.
Right.
And that, there's a one line in the New Testament, in the book of Matthew, which says that the crowd that was the rabble-rousing crowd that surrounded the crucifixion said, "Let his blood be on us and our descendants." That's something that I think was put in there, frankly, by people who, let's face it. I mean, this was a civil war in the early first 100 years between two Jewish sects, one being the rabbinic sect and the other being the Christian sect, and that there was a lot of nasty and bitter things written at that time on both sides, and that was one of these things that was injected into the New Testament as basically a curse on the Jews. And it's something that runs contrary to the Torah, which says that you're not held responsible for, according to the book of Ezekiel, I think it is, or there's several sites, that you are not held responsible for the sins of your fathers and your grandfathers, that you stand before God as an individual and as a people in every generation. And so thus it's a contradiction, but it's one that's in the New Testament. There's really no way around that. I'm not suggesting that Christians change their New Testament, but I also think that we should note that for whatever reason, the ministry of Jesus did result in a transmission of the moral and ethical precepts of the Torah to a huge portion of the world, and that I'm grateful for that, and I believe that mission
if you zoom out,
the establishment of the United States.
Right. So this is really interesting because Leo and I are students of the wisdom of Kabbalah for a few decades already with the genuine Kabbalist, authentic Kabbalist, and he always is talking from like 5 light years away, at entire processes, and like what you said is kind of bold, but if you zoom out, kind of take your emotions out of it. I think you were talking about the sociologist earlier, and you see, how do you get a bunch of, I'll just say, monkeys, whatever, primitive people,
savages,
savage people, and you move them all towards some kind of care towards each other, love, introduce the concept of love your neighbor as yourself. So it's a messy friggin' process to take a bunch of savages living in caves and in jungles and forests and raise them through civilization with these and like you said, the spreading of Christianity did a pretty, it was bloody, but they did the jungle's also bloody. Chimpanzees eat other monkeys alive. We're better than that as a people, but yeah, it spread. If we really zoom out, these hopefully maybe it could have been done better, but it helped spread, and maybe even probably the foundation of this country. And
Indeed.
Well, not only that, by the way, you guys are only talking Christianity, but it's the same with Islam. There is that sense that Christianity and Islam are both kind of two sides that are sort of needed, to live around this, the Judaic idea, and that together they kind of make a whole, right? Like a left side, a right side, all of that, without getting too much into it. But the question is towards what end? Right, like all these, long, processes and how they're unfolding, and this religious one. You haven't even gotten to the, racial anti-Semitism and the political one, but and maybe you will. But where are they leading us? That's what we're curious about. Eventually, you can't change the world, right? You can't change a country. You can't change a city. You can't change a neighborhood. It's hard to get everyone in your building to agree on something, but you can change yourself, and that's what we're after. Little changes that will grow to a critical mass. What we're saying also is that we Jews, we've had it. There was a moment in time that Jews actually touched that quality that the whole world is waiting for us to give them, and which is what we're discussing in our talks. And you can hear about it in episode 7 of the Mystery Book podcast, the first 22 episodes of this whole series. And we go into some really heartwarming descriptions, right? Like the
Temple
Woodstock.
Love, that episode is called.
What's that? Temple Love, right?
Temple Love.
Yeah, it was the Woodstock before Common Era.
Yeah, people should listen to that one and get a taste of something that they always knew should exist or could exist. It did exist. And that's what we're looking to build. Check that out in episode number 7, Temple of.
Well, this is the Jew Function, and let's get back to our guest. And this religious one, you haven't even gotten to the racial anti-Semitism and the political one, but and maybe you will. But where are they leading us? That's what we're curious about eventually.
Well, I mean, I think with regard to Christianity, we have irreconcilable differences, of course, but at the same time, we also believe in God. We believe in Sinai. Christianity did embrace our Torah. They call it the Old Testament, which is a little insulting, but nevertheless, they do hold.
They could have called it the original Testament. Let's put it this way. It has to be the old one.
But even within Jews,
and that they do preach it and they do understand it, and that Jesus's ministry was very Jewish in many ways. I think that generally we have always viewed historically Jesus as having been a heretic, and he was by claiming that he was the Messiah. But nevertheless, his ministry has resulted in this flowering of Judaic understanding and morality. And that I think that recently, maybe in the past couple of centuries, there's been a reassessment of Jesus by the rabbis, who now tend to view him as having been a devout Jew, who leaned toward the Hillel school the Shammai school versus the Hillel school, which is why Christianity is a little bit more dogmatic when it comes to questions like abortion and whatnot. But nevertheless was a sincere Jew. He believed he was the Messiah, but he meant well, and that he felt that he was like the prophets. He had come to fulfill the Torah, not because necessarily he was the Messiah, but because, like the prophets, he wanted to lift up his own people. So, I think there's a reassessment. I've heard people talk about the dual covenant theory, which is interesting. It's not something that'll ever be accepted, I don't think, by most Jews or Christians. But on the surface, it does make a certain amount of sense, in that it does appear that, God operates in the world, and that the Christian ministry has resulted in an enormous advance in the morality of man. And it has created such great societies as the United States. But at the same time, the Jewish covenant remains, and Jesus himself in the book of Matthew and in the book of Acts is quoted as saying that the covenant between Moses and God is forever, and forever means forever. So both things are in a way true.
You're right. So again, where does it lead us? Where do we go from here?
We understand that we believe in God and that we share the Torah in a way. I mean, we may have different interpretations of it, but that that to me should be the emphasis that we look forward to. And
wait, I'm sorry. So are you saying that this? I'm kind of inferring from your words that the solution to anti-Semitism has to do with a certain understanding, certain bridge building between Jews and Christians. That we're all moving in the same direction,
yes,
more or less. Is this what you're saying?
We all believe in the Creator of the universe. We all believe in one God. We may have different permutations on that, but basically.
But in Israel right now, for example, one party doesn't want the ones who believe in God don't want the buses to run on Saturday. So
right. Hold on. I was getting to Israel before we get to Israel. Let me just throw one extra wrench in the wheels there. So that's with the Christians. Then you have the Muslims, which theoretically also believe in the one God. We should also be getting along and friendly and all that. And, to some extent, it has, been the case throughout history. There were great moments, right, of convivencia in Spain. There were like these great examples of how this can go. But, there were always forces seemingly working underneath to always undermine that relative peace that existed. So before we even get to Israel, I'm asking, and maybe Israel plays an important role in this, has an important place in this, but theoretically, we should have gotten along a long time ago. We should have been buddies a long time ago. It should have been off the table a long time ago, and yet it's not. As soon as the Enlightenment movement started to come along, and Jews played an important role in that as well, of course. How else? This is rolling along. Everybody thinks, oh, we're all going to be, great humanists and just focus on the noble qualities of people and on rational thinking, and yet we plunge into the 20th century, the bloodiest century ever, right? And racial theory, and again, Jews are singled out even after trying to be great friends with everyone. You basically have all kinds of Jews. It's almost like you could choose. You could have said, someone could have said, look, there's Orthodox Jews, there's socialist Jews, and then there's assimilated Jews. Which one do you like? We can do away with the other two and keep the one, and we'll all do the same. But it didn't work. They were all terrible in the eyes of the rest of the world.
I mean, we basically have been accused of all of these things, and it gets to the second point that I wanted to make. Besides, we talked about religious anti-Semitism, and I think Islam is a separate subject that can be. It's more of a political anti-Semitism in their case. But the second leg in the stool is the political leg. And that did emanate, I think, out of the Enlightenment. And I think it was embodied by a pamphlet that was written by Karl Marx called On the Jewish Question, published in 1843 and republished as A World Without Jews. And he basically capsulized a political form of anti-Semitism, that the Jews represent a certain human qualities like self-interest and huckstering and money, and that we worship these things, and that we created these things, and that these things are false, and that in order to get rid of these things and create this bizarre international ant colony that he envisioned, where everyone is de facto equal, you would have to eliminate Judaism. And he says so very clearly in this anti-Semitic book that absolutely influenced the Nazis. That basically, Judaism was responsible for property, that we were responsible for all of these things that we actually do embrace and that are good things, that are normal and natural to the human condition. We all have property. Animals understand property. Try to mess with the property of a bird by going into its nest. Try to mess with the property of a dog, by going too close to it. I mean, this is natural and normal, but Marx wanted to eradicate these institutions so he could create this de facto equality. And he saw the means to do it as the annihilation of Judaism, which he actually states very explicitly in that pamphlet. And that was a canon of the left, right up till the Nazis when it became unfashionable. But yet it still underlies their beliefs. They just don't say Jews anymore.
Charles, if we take away the word Jew, what is it that Karl Marx wanted to get rid of?
He wanted to get rid of all of the things that make us unequal, like, family loyalty, belief in a God, property, the right to trade goods and services, money, which is an abstract form of property. All of these institutions, which are normal and natural to human beings anyway, but which are part of Judaism. And I'm proud to say that.
So if you take all of those things, and you were going to give him one name, the name he's giving all of those natural things in human society, he's calling Jewish.
Exactly. And does so quite explicitly in that pamphlet.
So is it under the auspice of just those people? Is there any other group who embodies those things?
Well, he knows he was half Jewish, so I mean he knows it.
Well, he had a Jewish background, but he also he blames Judaism for creating Christianity, which he said corrupted Europe, and creating the United States, because that was a Judaizing movement. That was a movement by which individuals would become sovereign under God. They would, as opposed to worshiping of this man-made state. And that he believed that these concepts were false, that they were what he called, quote, false consciousness, that could be changed.
Well, I think we want to really open up the whole Marx thing. I mean, that's a thing in and of itself.
Right.
But what are we doing now? Maybe now is a good time to kind of, okay. So we managed to somehow survive these things, even, somehow by some miracle of God, survive this thing. We weren't destroyed when Karl Marx called for our destruction. We're not destroyed by the Russians, by the Germans. We were somehow managed to, make it to Israel. start a
Yeah.
country or restart a country, let's say, and it kind of worked, okay for the first 50, 60, years. And now it's also coming away at the seams, as Seth was saying. There's a big divide, and that divide, when you really remove the layers, it's like, it's this law and it's that law, and they serve in the
It's
army.
like the Karl Marx Jews versus the Orthodox Jews almost.
Exactly. It's basically, we want to be like everyone else, and you guys are in the way. You guys with your ideas of a creator and laws and restrictions and all that. That's
And then
kind of
the other ones say this is a place given by God and we need to follow God's laws. And
Right. Well, see, now you're getting into a topic of like the internal problems within the state of Israel.
I think
That's
just before you answer that, I just want to kind of really frame it, because it goes back to what we were saying in our prep call. Eventually, me personally, I can control the world. Seth and I, we got together. We're like, let's solve anti-Semitism. We can't control the world. We can't control all the anti-Semites. We talk to them, it's like, but we can't change people's minds by, we
right.
can't compel someone to love us, but we can look at ourselves internally and do something about it. And for me, Israel is, as is always the case, the Jewish nation is like a hologram. You look at a piece, it's a macrocosm for the rest of the entity, right? So yeah, Jews in America, you share a lot of things. The problems you find in Israel exist here. They're less intensified because of the distance, and right, you have room for everyone in a way. In Israel, it's much smaller. There's a lot of pressure, so you get the reaction to happen much quicker. But it's the same deep.
Well, you guys would probably know a lot more about this. In that, I mean, it's a dynamic that I don't totally understand. In that, I can just give a personal anecdote. I have a cousin in Israel who was visiting me here in Boston with his wife, and they're very secular people. And we invited them over for Shabbos dinner, which is a normal thing, I think, to do. And his wife is said to us, "Oh, no, we don't do that. I mean, that's what they do. You don't do Shabbos." I mean, it's like, and we're like, "Well, what are you talking about?" I mean, has it gotten to be that bad that people are like, and then on the other side, I understand that you have Orthodox who they don't serve in the army, they don't pay, they're supported by the government, they're basically on a form of welfare, and that there's a legitimate resentment over that. So it's very fractious, and it just I don't, I mean, I'm not in a position to know this because I don't know the inside of Israel. You guys know a lot more than I do in that.
there's an incredible structure that maybe we'll start to learn about it. It's called the family. And it's not something that's very common
Yeah.
anymore. But
Oh wow! I said even Barack Obama in 2008 was touting the importance of the family before it was, destroyed. So
Right.
okay, I forgot about that. But
there was a moment.
that structure, which doesn't have much value anymore, but I think is a pretty important structure for the stability of society and the
Yeah.
health of society. What happens in that structure is you can have people with all different kinds of personalities and qualities and traits. Look at your kids. One is aggressive, and one is passive, and one is intellectual, and one is emotional. But somehow at that Shabbat table, or somehow under that one roof, everyone is accepted and everyone is a part of it. We don't have this value of family so much in society today, but I don't think, Charles, that we're going to be able to debate our way out of these two opposites. And I don't think we're going to be able to get away from, I think it's almost nature is making us be different, is developing us to be different. And then so how do those different groups, what is the glue that will hold them together? Because they're Orthodox, have their way that they want, right? They're not going to agree to a country where the buses run on Saturday and they can't study the Torah. And the seculars who want to get along with the other nations and want to be like other people and want to have a normal modern life with all of the technology and things of modern life. They don't want to be Orthodox. So what are we going to do?
I mean, you seem to be describing a potential for civil war. I mean, that it could be a spark. It's sort of like the American Civil War. Eventually, the society collapsed under this one issue, which was slavery. And it was also the cause of the destruction of the Second Temple. You had people, they just stopped talking to each other, and they basically, went to war with each other, and the Romans were able to just go in and pick up the pieces. So I don't know. I mean, what can be done? I mean, this is the dilemma. Is there any way that there can be some? I mean, first of all, I mean, the bigger picture is that if they kill the golden goose, they're all going to go down. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, both sides will end up with nothing, and it's kind of like a corporation dealing with a union. If they don't get along, then the company will go bankrupt, and both sides will be out of a job. How can you have a council or something, or some kind of an organization where you can have people come together in an organized way and actually figure out ways to at least coexist with these differences, not necessarily even compromise, but just have a means by which they can get together and discuss things? Because if they don't, then they're going to they're going to give up the ghost. I mean, both sides will end up with nothing.
Right. This either you accept the Torah or this will be the place of your burial. Like to go back
That's
to,
right.
to the Mount Sinai. Right. So how do we continue to have that Mount Sinai moment at every day?
All right, so the Jew function. A lot of people ask, what is this, and who are we?
Are we anti-Semitic? Are we self-hating Jews? I heard that also.
We're like you. We're concerned citizens. We did our research, hours and hours and hours of research into historic patterns, into Jewish texts, and I mean a lot of Jewish texts, going all the way back to Abraham and other notable sages and Kabbalists, and all the way into the recent era. You'll be surprised how much amazing quotes exist about the need for Jews to unite. So that's why we're doing this podcast. Like us, hit the bell thing on the YouTube so you can get a notification when a new episode is up. Share it far and wide. Find something that you like. YouTube lets you cut clips. Share that clip with a loved one, with a Jewish friend, with a non-Jew who's like bothering you at work about something, and we're like, oh, that clip is exactly what I needed. Share it far and wide. Commenting is a great way to get a conversation going. And let's get back to our guest.
Right. This either you accept the Torah or this will be the place of your burial. Like to go back
That's right.
to the Mount Sinai. Right. So how do we continue to have that Mount Sinai moment at every day?
I mean, I personally think that it's the common denominator of a belief in God. And I would say to an atheist, whether or not you believe in a divine creator of the universe, do you really want to have your life and your society decided by a group of people who can operate on whim and decide what's best for you?
But it's not enough,
because
Charles.
if you
Because
don't have a
who's
God, you're
going
going to have the dictator.
Who's the spokesman for God? That's the problem.
Well, I mean, you make the point. On the other hand, are you going to have a rabbi claiming to be a spokesman for God who is going to tell people that they women can't even be seen in public and so yeah, I mean that's the issue. I mean, how can that be? No one is a spokesman for God. That would be anti-Jewish to make that suggestion. That in itself is a heresy.
So where does it come from inside of the people that they'll want to do this? If we can't have somebody come from above and tell us, you can't have to do this, you can't be like that. So where does it come from? This is what we're trying to figure out. We
Yeah.
clearly know what we feel and what we believe is the unity of us. That will be our salvation. But how do we talk to people about it? How do people feel it? It's something from both sides of the table.
I don't know. I mean, I guess there has to be an understanding that if we don't do this, we may hate each other, but if we don't do it, we're going to all be out of business. I mean, it's kind of reminds me of every year I've heard this, that when there's a Super Bowl, there's a big convention hotel room that's rented in Tel Aviv where you have ultra-Orthodox and ultra-secular American Jews get together and have hot dogs and watch the game and have beer. I mean, is there some kind of a cultural?
It used to, no, listen, it used to be that there were a lot of those common moments.
Right.
Yes, in the day-to-day, not too much interaction. You know, if you're a secular guy who lives in Tel Aviv, you know, you go to the beach and you go to your parties and you do your thing, and you don't interact that much with the, you know, with the Orthodox public. But the army was one place where most people, even believe, you know, people with,
Sure.
you know, except for the really the you know, the Orthodox, everyone else would meet there. That would be the common equalizer. Even that didn't, you know, go across all the boundaries, but it was a pretty good equalizer in that sense. I don't know, and the thing is, I came back to Israel 2 years ago, so I don't know at what, you know, when did things go that bad? You know, at what point the schism became so bad, because a lot of it, by the way, has to do with the media and not so much with the actual practicalities on the ground. It's not like, you know, everybody talks about the law of not bringing the you know, the chametz to the hospitals on Passover, right? The fact of the matter is, there is no law. It was left to every hospital to decide by itself. And what they want to do now is pass a law that would actually give the power to the hospital manager to decide how they want to address it. Create an area for, you know, chametz and not chametz. You have Arab patients who are there. There's all kinds of things. But up until now, they didn't have the power to even do it. And so these things were not even enforced. You know, when the norm is stronger than the, you know, and there's no law, then that's what goes. So people kind of made, the media kind of amplifies and gaslights everything, you know, beyond proportion. It's like, oh, they're going to take away gay rights. It's like, no one's taking away gay rights. There's some new laws that they want to put into effect that may not pass through, but gay people in Israel have all the rights. I mean, it's down to some technical issues about how you're going to have a child with a host mother or not a host, you know, things like that. But not,
Sure.
no one is preventing them from doing anything. On the contrary.
No,
So
I mean, I understand that the society is becoming more radicalized on both sides. I mean, on the one side, you have the religious are becoming more extreme in a way that is not really conducive, frankly, to
yeah,
the Torah.
listen, they're afraid. It's a reaction. They're afraid that their well-being is
So
assaulted.
there's a polarization then.
Exactly. Every side lost faith in the ability of some higher or, you know, entity, let's call it the government or whatever it is, to take care of you know, of the well-being of everyone. It's kind of it's lost. That intuitive sense of security is lost.
Right. And then, of course, on the other side, on the left side, you've got an extreme reaction as well. And I think part of that is financed by people like George Soros.
Oh, for sure. It's,
you know, you have money coming in, the same people who took Trump out here in the United States.
Same.
They're anti, you know, they have an international agenda, and, you know, they're radicalizing people using money to do it. And that they don't care about Israeli unity. I mean, they don't want to have, you know, they want to have power. They want to take out Netanyahu, not for various reasons. I don't know. I don't get into internal Israeli politics, but he was elected.
Right, majority.
And you know, they're seditious. I mean, they want to. What do they expect? You know, they should elect a new government if they're unhappy.
And the funny thing is, and it goes also to a point that we keep making, is like, you know, we are our own worst enemy.
Right.
You know, it's like, instead of Jews working to somehow bring people together, we're working, you know, as a friend of mine here in America said, I mean, back in the US, a friend of mine was telling me, yeah, we Jews, you know, we should be the glue, but instead we're the oil. So,
well, you guys are doing your part. I mean, you're having this show, and you're probably bringing on both ultra Orthodox and ultra secular people. Maybe, you know, use this platform to bring them on together and to try to, you know, start to go one-on-one and get people to figure out, where do we have common denominator? Because again, if we kill the golden goose, we're all going to be out of business here.
It's true.
We do have some, whether we like it or not, we're in this together here. And
That's the thing that people forget. I think that there is no, even in Israel, people sort of entertain. Oh yeah, we'll divide the country, or we'll migrate to Europe. What are you talking about? There's nowhere to go. No one is
not
waiting
exactly
for you.
surrounded by people that have the best intentions here.
Yeah, nobody's waiting for you with flowers and like, hey, here's a job. We're just waiting for you. Like it's not happening.
That's right.
But I want to read a short quote from Baal Sulam, Yehuda Ashlag. I'm sure you probably heard of him. And he wrote an article called "The Peace," which is very apropos. And he wrote that there is no other cure for humanity but to assume the commandment of providence to bestow upon others in order to bring contentment to the Creator in the measure of the two verses. The first is love your friend as yourself, which is the attribute of the work itself. This means that the measure of work to bestow upon others for the happiness of society should be no less than the measure imprinted in man to care for his own needs. Moreover, he should put his fellow person's needs before his own. And the other verse is, and you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. This is the goal that must be before everyone's eyes when laboring for one's friend's needs. This means that he labors and toils only to be liked by the Creator, as he said, and they do his will. And if you wish to listen, you will feed on the fruit of the land, for poverty and torment and exploitation will be no more in the land, and the happiness of each and every one will rise ever higher beyond measure. I mean, a beautiful picture.
Indeed.
And I just want to put a little asterisk because, you say the word creator, people think it's a religious thing. And certainly for us, we're not religious people. Creator is the force of love and bestowal. It's a force, an upper force. It's a quality. It's not a grandfatherly figure in the sky.
Right. It's not a guy with a long white beard.
No, definitely no.
No idea.
It's an idea. It's a force. It is a force. Like you have gravity, electrostatic force, and nuclear force. There's a force above all the other forces. That's how Kabbalists describe this force. It's a quality of love, giving, bestowal. What's like a positive force, and we need to just imitate some of those qualities if you want to start feeling that force. That's essentially the remedy. And so the idea that you just gave to bring people together, I mean, Seth and I were talking about what we can do, and maybe there is no way around starting to bring two opposites together and to try to see how we can.
I mean, you guys are doing your part. Israel has to have a national conversation.
Yes,
it has to be ongoing and organized, and it has to can be very painful, but it has to happen because otherwise, people don't have to agree.
No.
It's just, and there's no reason any more than we're ever going to reconcile with Christians. I mean, it's not. There are irreconcilable differences, but yet there are certain common denominators.
If we brought, let's imagine that we brought some far, we probably couldn't start with the most extreme people because we would need to build up momentum and force within the group. But suppose we started with people, 60% off to pan 60% to the left and pan 60% to the right, because extreme, it would be just too hard to find common ground. We bring them together. So we got 10 people out of however many people in a group, and we're going to do some kind of workshop together. And what we're going to try and do is find some common ground together, right? We get 10 Jews, a bunch of Jews together from different spectrums, and we're going to go around, we're going to all speak. Nobody's going to tell the other one he's wrong. We're going to just try and at least find what can we agree on to start with. So what would be the question to start? And we can't start talking about God, because as soon as you say God, you can, but I'm just going to say that as soon as you say God, each of the 10 is going to have their own picture of what you're talking about, right? So that's going to be very confusing. This one thinks he's like, it has something to do with his tefillin and his, and his daughter's marriage tomorrow. And this one, thinks that it has to do with why he can't, marry his gay lover. And so you can't right away talk about. So what would be a question that we could start the first round of the workshop, or one of the rounds that we could all try and find some common ground?
I mean, I suppose you don't have to use the word God, even though that's what we call it. You can say that there is some, as you say, Leo, there is an external force that is outside of us, and that is reality. It's something that Thomas Jefferson said it's self-evident that we're all endowed by a creator. It doesn't have to be God. I mean, it's a singular force that created the universe, that nobody has any agency over, but that this force has an agency over us. And that we can leave those questions up to a certain degree of mystery, and that ultimately the individual and how they relate to that is personal, and it's within their own conscience. But yet we have to find certain basics, maybe a few pieces on agreement of what that means for the society, so that we can have our personal beliefs. We can go off and do whatever it is that we do, and we'll be right with our own understanding of that God. But in other words, this, I know Marx tried to abolish it, but there is such a thing as self-interest. We all have a self-interest. If your self-interest
Okay,
is
this
to
is a
have
good place
gay
to start. I
family,
think if you're
then-
going to start with God, it's going to be too difficult. But if you can start with that, we all have a self-interest. I think everyone can agree on that at
Yeah,
least.
there's a couple of basics that we can agree on, I think, and
So
that
let's just try and
self-interest is
crystallize
to-
them, because I think it'd be really helpful. What can we all agree on?
And I think that they could all agree that they believe that Israel has a right to be a sovereign Jewish state. Now, what the definition of Judaism is obviously a complicated question, but they all want to have sovereignty. They want to have a future for their families. They want to have the right to walk down the street in Tel Aviv as a Jew and feel a sense of security and a sense of future. We all have a self-interest in that. We want to preserve a society that has enough of a structure of order that we can have our family and we can live in a relative condition of freedom and develop prosperity. There are some basics.
Do we need to agree on a new definition of what a Jew is? Because we bring a lot of people to these talks, and whenever we ask, okay, how would you define a Jew to an alien? And they were like, well, this is a complicated question. Like, no one gives a one-line definition.
Right.
And I wonder if this is maybe something that is hindering us.
Well, we could tweak the idea of a God and simply say we believe that there is a force outside of human manipulation, whether for good or for bad, that exists and that is a creator of everything that we know. And that there is such a thing as a moral and ethical code. Whether or not we agree on the particulars, we understand that there is a blueprint by which we know what's right and wrong. We know that murder is wrong. I mean, there are certain basics that we can identify that are moral and immoral. And that in a sense, a lot of the functionality of Jewish life and laws of kosher laws, all the rest, that has to do with getting to those basic understandings which are universal and which apply to all. So there are some basic. Maybe it's an issue of developing a couple of basic statements that we can agree to, almost like a new manifesto, I suppose. That it's complicated, but yet again, it's based on the fact that we have a gun to our head. I mean, we want to have a life that's safe and prosperous.
Have you heard of this guy, Sam Harris?
Oh yeah, sure. Mhm.
Okay, so I think that if he were at the table, for example, I think we even need to find questions that are even more general, because I read something this week that he said that these three books of the Torah are the most barbaric of any book ever written, or something like that. So I think even trying to use the Torah as an umbrella, I think we're going to just hit a wall, even with some of these intellectual types.
Well, maybe there's a way to approach that. Yes, you could say the Torah there's a lot of violence in there, but yet, we can put aside, in a sense, the particulars of that and take a look at what is it that we are to learn from this morally and ethically. we understand, like, for the attack by Amalek on the back of the caravan was such a heinous act that it created the rules of war, the rules of engagement that apply to all of mankind. That in a sense he was the world's first terrorist. He deliberately attacked the weakest member of the caravan, the children, the elderly, the infirm, as a way of creating social disorder. Can we all agree that there are rules of engagement that came out of that, rather than focus on the barbarism of defeating him and all of that?
Well, we have an even smoother way around all this, which is why don't we begin to read this book as happening all inside a person? All these wars, all these struggles are struggles between your different desires. Some desires which are selfish for yourself, at the expense of everyone, and then some desires that are aimed at altruism, at love of others, at unity, and it's this whole game is
very
this,
normal for us, Leo, but I think it's a revolutionary idea. For
listen, but I'm trying to bring it in front of people who are normal people and
Right.
see what they think, because it feels like we're going around the topic, but there is no way around it. I mean, it really requires a deeper look at those ideas, and we go a lot to the writings of Baal Sulam and how he explains it, and it makes a lot of sense. Like you said, you read certain things in the Torah and you feel that they resonate with you. There's an intuitive sense that it's okay, maybe it didn't happen, or maybe it happened like this, but something about this picture makes sense to me, right? It's that. And we're saying, let's take this exact idea that you just said and take it even deeper. Let's treat the whole thing as an intuitive experience that every person has to go through. And this is a struggle
that
between
Pharaoh is a quality inside of me, that Moses is a quality inside of me, that all of these things are qualities inside of me.
that are on the way to this personal transformation from being an animal which takes care only of itself, maybe it's closest to beings, but it's totally managed by the system, to a human which can make a choice, and it can make a choice to take care of others. That's the reason we call man, Adam, as we understand it, is from the word dome, similar, is similar to that creator. So we're called, we're named after our future destination, to be more similar to that quality.
Right.
So it doesn't matter, you believe in it. No, look, there's like a system of nature, and there's parts in it, and things are moving, and you're also in it. You're also moving. Where do you want to move to? That's what I'm asking. We want to ask people. We want to move up or move back down.
There are ways to understand some of these. Like, I've heard people criticize the Torah. They say, well, it allows slavery, right? But what they're missing is the fact that the Torah was given by God at a time when slavery was the economy of the entire world, and that it reformed slavery to the point where eventually that led to its abolition by putting in laws that protected slaves, that made slaves part of the family. The slave was able to observe Shabbos. The slave had certain rights, and it stopped certain practices that actually were brought back later by slavers.
It even mentions, when it speaks of the rule of love your friend as yourself, it says if you have a pillow and your slave doesn't have a pillow, if you sleep on your pillow and you don't give it to your slave, that's just selfish. If you throw away the pillow and nobody's, that's sodomite rule. Well, we're all going to suffer. And that's the Marx way. Like, let's just cut everybody's heads.
Well, it's looking at it very superficially.
But he said what you have to do is actually give him the pillow. Let your slave sleep on the pillow. That's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
So again, I think if you ask me, we're creatures of comfort. We want the easy way out. But growing up is not an easy thing. A child's process of growing up is fraught with frustration, but we don't like frustration, and we don't like the fact that we're told to do something or to deal with something. And I think that's one of the issues that humanity is facing. We're just not ready to kind of swallow the bitter pill and say, okay, we gotta grow up. We got to stop being so selfish like 5-year-old kids and start looking at the world around us and we can exist here together. I mean, it's just a question
We
of
can, even though we may have a fractious family. I mean, you could take a look at a microcosm. I mean, in sociology, we distill everything down to the person or to the smallest unit.
exactly.
And if you take a look at the family, you get people who are really, really opposites from each other and don't get along. But yet there is a certain cohesion and a certain loyalty, especially when, you know, the proverbial shit hits the fan, you know, everybody comes together to
So we-
you know, and helps.
Yeah, we want to do that. This is our work. This is what we, you know, because if 5 nations attack Israel, we'll see the people unite. You know, it'll happen probably in an hour. You know, we want, but we feel like we're grown up enough. We have enough experience in history that we don't have to wait until half of us are exterminated or until some terrible world war happens across the world. We want to figure out how we can make this happen.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Before that.
So before we close, I wonder, Charles, if you had a way to speak to all the Jews just now, turn this knob, and all the Jews are listening. You got their ears for 1 minute. What would you tell them?
I don't have any elevated speech. I mean, I'm working
from the heart, just from the heart.
I mean, I'm enmeshed right now in writing a new book on Judaism that's going to be called A Case for Jexit, the American exit from the left, the American Jewish exit from the left, because I think that our institutions have been liberal left and that this is an old and calcified way of looking at the world, and it's not reflective of Jews as they're coming up in the world today. And so I make this case. I do it the best I can, I mean, to the best of my ability. But I just think that we all need to take a part of reaching out and developing some fundamentals toward what our family is, in the context that we are not going to agree. We don't have to agree, but yet there are certain common denominators in order to preserve the cohesion of the whole that I think we need to come to, and it's going to be very difficult. So I congratulate you guys for doing what you're doing. To me, this is an incredible thing, and it can be expanded to really develop into a national and an international Jewish conversation that needs to be had proactively, and rather than, as you say, Seth, rather than wait for, you know, the invasion, we have to we have to put our own house in order internally. And that's really also the best answer to anti-Semitism. You know, we can't control what other people think or do. We can control what we think and do in our own home. And when we do that, I think, in my opinion, we get closer to God.
Beautiful.
So,
amen.
okay.
Charles Moskowitz, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Great pleasure and honor.
Yeah, very warm.
Same here. We always, you know, it's always, you know, you start a conversation one way, and then by the end of it, you're like, wow, this is a great guy. We want him in our circle, you know.
Thank you. I mean, anytime, and I hope you guys come into mine too.
We'd love to.
We'll arrange it.
We'll arrange it. We'd love to, and you know, when your book comes out, maybe you'll come again and talk about it. And I'll send you a few articles, but just in general, you know, this is really important. And you know, when you take the time to do it, I think that shows, that just leads by example. You know, that's what we got to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. This is the Jew Function. If you didn't realize it by now, reminding you to subscribe and like and comment and follow us everywhere. It's always the Jew Function, where we look for the function of the Jews, and I think we're getting closer to finding it. So
Indeed.
Stay with us. Take care. Bye, Charles.
Bye.